Hello everybody. Today we're going to be continuing our work on using completing the square, but now we're going to use it in order to solve quadratic equations. To begin, let's look at an example. We have x squared minus 16x is equal to negative 15. So here we want to find out what values of x will solve this equation. And the way we're going to do it is by completing the square. Now what I mean by that is we're going to complete the square on this side where we have the x squared and the term with x in it. So let's remember back to last time where if we had x squared minus 16x, how are we going to complete that square? Well, let's draw our picture again to remind us. We have a cell here and a cell here that are both of length x in our area model, which will give us an area of x squared. And then here we will have an area of negative 16, and it will also have an area of side of x, which gives us an area of negative 16x. Now of course areas usually can't be negative, but in this math world it's okay for now. So what are we going to do from here? Well, we're going to turn this box, we're going to split this number in half to give us x squared, and then this green line will only go over negative 8 because we split it in half. So this value here will be negative 8x, and then we'll also have that going down here. So this area will also be negative 8x. And now if we find this missing area here, that'll be the number we need to add to complete the square, which will be negative 8 times negative 8, which is 64. So to complete the square, we would need to add 64, but now we have an equation. So what we're going to do instead is we have to make sure to balance the equation. So I can't just add 64 to this side. I have to make sure to add 64 to both sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 64 to both sides, which will give me x squared minus 16x plus 64 is equal to negative 15 plus 64. Okay. Now I'm going to combine like terms on the left side to get x squared minus 16x plus 64 is equal to 49. Okay. Now I know that this one, so if we have the square here, we know that the sides are x minus 8 and x minus 8. So I could look at how to factor that, or I could just know, based on my area model, that this will be x minus 8 squared, which is equal to 49. Now we did some work on solving equations of this form earlier, so now all you have to do is take the square root on both sides, and remember to say plus or minus here. So the square root of x minus 8 squared is x minus 8. And the square root of 49 will be plus or minus 7. This will give us two separate equations, one where x minus 8 equals positive 7, and one where x plus 8 is equal to negative 7. To solve this one, we would add 8 to both sides to get x equals 15, and to solve this one, we would subtract 8 from both sides to get x equals this should be a minus. We would also add 8 to both sides to get x equals 1, and these would be our two solutions. Now I want to solve the equation x squared plus 8x is equal to negative 7 by completing the square. So we need to find a number that we would add to this side in order to complete the square, and then we also need to add it to that side, and that's basically the gist of all these problems. Now remember that this number will always be b over 2a squared. So we could identify here that we would be adding 8 divided by 2 squared, which would be 4 squared, which would be 16, to both sides. But let's confirm that really quick. So once again, we're going to make our square right here, which represents the x. So this square here represents the value x squared. And then we have a side length of 8. And of course, this side length is also x because it's a rectangle. So this area is 8x. So that looks like this is representing the area of this. Now we're going to cut this in half, and we're going to get a box representing x squared, because we're not changing this part of the box. And then we're going to have one that's length 4. So the area here will be 4x. And the area here will have another side length of 4 will be 4x. Confirm that these areas are the same, because 4x plus 4x is 8x. And now if we wanted to complete the square, we would need to find this missing element, which is in fact 16. So that means what we're going to do is we're going to add 16 to both sides. This will give us x squared plus 8x plus 16 is equal to negative 7 plus 16. Now the reason we're going through this process is because doing this completing the square will allow us to factor this into a binomial squared, which we can easily take the square root of. Now let's simplify the right side. We'll have x squared plus 8x plus 16. Negative 7 plus 6 is 9. Now this side, we could go through the process of factoring it, or if we look at our square, we know the side lengths are x plus 4, so it'll just be x plus 4 squared is equal to 9. So then we're going to take the square root on both sides, and remember, whenever you take the square root, you always have to make one of the sides plus or minus, and usually it makes sense to do it where the side that doesn't have a variable is the plus or minus, but technically it could be either way, and technically both of them could have it, but it's a little bit superfluous, so you only need one. So the square root of x plus 4 squared is just x plus 4. So x plus 4 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 9, which is 3. The tricky part here is remembering that this means we have two equations. One is x plus 4 is equal to positive 3, and the other is x plus 4 is equal to negative 3. Now we're going to subtract 4 from both sides to get x equals negative 1 here, and we're also going to subtract 4 from both sides to get x equals negative 7 here, and those would be our two solutions. Finally, let's look at one more example. X squared minus 4x is equal to 21. We want to complete the square on x squared minus 4x. So we're going to draw our box and take a moment to pause the video, see if you can remember the formula for what the value will be, and then see if you can figure out on your own how the box diagram represents that. So we have x and x squared, and we're going to have an area. This side length is negative 4, which means this area is negative 4x, which represents the left-hand side of the equation. Now we're going to split this part down the middle, which will give us x squared. This is basically like writing x squared minus 2x when we go to here, but that's a little bit besides the point. So this area is going to be negative 2 for the side length, so we have negative 2x. Oops. This side length is also going to be negative 2, so this will be negative 2x. So if we completed the square, we would find this missing value is negative 2 times negative 2, because those would be the side lengths of this missing square, so the area would be 4. So that means I know that I need to add 4 to both sides. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. That gives me x squared minus 4x plus 4 is equal to 21 plus 4 is 25. Now once again I could factor this, but the nice thing about the area model is I don't need to factor it, and I don't need to remember that it's going to be x plus b over 2a squared, because it will always be that. but we can just intuitively look at our box and be like, oh, of course, it must be x minus 2 squared, because the side lengths of the box are x minus 2, which will equal 25. So now we're going to take the square root on both sides. Remember that we have to add a plus or minus. So we're going to get x minus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 25 is 5, which will give us the two equations. X minus 2 is equal to 5, and x minus 2 is equal to negative 5. Both of these I'm going to add 2. This gives me x equals 7, and this one gives me x equals negative 3, and those are my two solutions. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a good week, and I'll talk to you again on Wednesday.